Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is our second installment of the Solomon Moore podcast. I hope everyone's doing well. How are you today, Solomon?
Good, man. Yeah, it is Valentine's Day. So anybody out there celebrating, certainly want to wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day, and excited to start podcast number 2 here. Obviously, this is just going to be an operation and consistency for us to make sure that we're getting out what we feel is valuable news on a weekly basis. So yeah, feeling good, Darren. So if you want to kick it off, there was a document that came out about or that announcement with Ripple for joining the Digital Euro Association, which there's not a ton of organizations within that would raise my eyebrows, but it's more of a think tank. But if we kind of look back, we can see that there has been documentation in the past, and don't mind the explicitive in here, but yeah, France's central bank, Bank of France, openly discussing Ripple and XRP as a possible platform for Europe's central digital currency. So literally the entire platform for the digital euro has been in discussions by the central bank of France as far as potentially running with RippleNet and utilizing XRP. And Darren, do you remember that there was another document that came out? I don't remember if it was from I think it was a Bank of France document. So this Gemini one that Darren has up right now is from 2020 or 2021. But there was one a little bit prior to that talked about wholesale CBDCs and how the native asset on a blockchain could potentially integrate with a wholesale CBDC. And it mentions Ethereum and Ripple as examples within that as well from the Central Bank of France. So,
yeah, the Bank of France had a PDF that specifically mentioned testing Ethereum and XRP. So that was pretty massive, in my opinion. The other thing was Mark Carney also slips and says that there might be a potential for Ethereum in the smart contract realm and XRP in the wholesale finance market realm. So this is all kind of tying in together. The central bankers have kind of hinted at all this stuff, and we're seeing documents. Ripple now joins the Digital Euro Association.
When did Mark? I don't remember seeing that. When did Mark Carney say that or slip up and say that?
He said it in like an interview. I have it on my channel. I'll send you the video after this. But he slips it. He says Ripple, and then just kind of slips it. And I was there watching, and I caught him. So I publicized it and made it public. So what are your thoughts on the Digital Euro Association?
I mean, I looked through. I mean, we kind of pulled up some of the partners yesterday. I know that like Raiffeisen Bank, and there's a couple. I think, is it W3C also that's involved in it? There's a lot of like names that probably need a little bit more digging into, but I didn't see anything major that stuck out. More so of just another think tank type organization. I do know that I'm pretty sure. So Digital Pound Foundation is obviously. Quant, Electronium, Ripple, I think Algorand has ties into that, and that I think they retweeted this as well. I think it's just more integration into these think tanks. I didn't look at it as potentially being like a reference point into anything major for me to raise my eyebrows at, but still, interesting. We're going to see more and more of this for sure, not just the digital euro, but digital dollar think tanks and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more about positioning, right? So it's just an association that speaks about digital euro, the problems, the potentials, and now Ripple's positioned into that group to give feedback on the issue. So, it's definitely good positioning, but I don't know exactly, what it will lead to. That might be the upside potential, is where this leads, the connections Ripple gets and everything. So our next document is the Ernest Young payments document. And there was a ton in here. And Ernst & Young is one of the big four, right? I think Deloitte falls into that group. I think PricewaterhouseCoopers falls into that group. And there's a lot of good statistics in here. What was interesting to me in this, and there was a lot, but this, even what Darren has right now, 2021, it talks about biometric cards, which is interesting to say the least.
because I think that a lot of us believe that that probably is where this goes. And we have additional things within this episode regarding kind of that self-sovereign identity where you're kind of custodying your own data. A lot of people don't understand that that's where we get to, but regardless, I think we should probably link this document, Darren, because it really does kind of talk about the shift into digitization as far as from the payment standpoint, and really even from the data standpoint, as far as us custodying our own data and everything else.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me that the APAC region is the one that's, the most we're seeing out of real-time payments. There's a chart down here that talks about the different countries that are moving with real-time payments, and those were the countries that Ripple is more prevalent in, right? The Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia. So I found that pretty interesting, and to talk about the big data part of this, right? It's kind of interesting to me that the central banks have blown this massive bubble, given the big tech this, $1 trillion market caps. And now they're kind of like pushing to bring in digitization and Web3 and kind of take away that power that they've given them. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And we consistently see, kind of like the gig economy type things that are coming out. And you just had pulled up kind of like how it's discussing, sending money back to friends and family back home. And a lot of people don't understand, or maybe they do, how many workers are not native to whatever country that they're living in, and they're just living there to work and potentially send money back home, because the opportunity for them to actually make money and support their family is greater in different countries. But the problem is, when they're sending money back to their families, which I'm assuming would be for living expenses, making sure that their families can eat. They don't know how long it's going to take for that payment to get to their family, I should say settlement. And they don't even know how much money they're going to get on the back. And it's just this, it's the same thing that we consistently see. And there is that shift into more efficient mechanisms for sure.
Well, also like global businesses right now, there's so many businesses that operate just on the internet. And, they're globalized, and they're able to pay people. And, if you have instant settlement, that's resources for your business. If you're waiting a week to get your money in order to use your money, right? If you have to hire new employees or expand your business, this really helps small business as well as large businesses. So I thought that's pretty massive too. So the next piece of information is Forte gets their license, their transaction license for blockchain games. And it was specifically their money transmitter license and their bit license in New York, which I know is extremely difficult to get. So that's pretty massive.
Yeah, they've had a good amount of integrations, and I think a decent amount of funding as well, Forte. And when does this go back to, Darren? The Forte, was it I always say X Spring. Was it a Spring initiative where they tied it with Spring, or was it something else with Ripple? But I know that there was incubation involved from Ripple as well. And there are, I'm going to forget the guy's name. But yeah, when was it? That was like 2018, 2019 with Forte. Yeah.
It was a couple of years ago. But it was a Spring initiative where they invested in Forte, or is it Forte?
I think it's Forte. But you are right, though. I mean, we've seen how difficult it is to get licenses in New York, and that money transmitter license. Interesting, because I think a lot of these projects that are in existence right now that are launching, they're dealing in money transmission. They're dealing in all sorts of things, and they're not necessarily dealing in the regulations to be able to facilitate what they're already doing. And I'm curious to see what happens if, and I think a lot of DeFi as well. It'll be interesting to see what type of licenses they need to acquire, and what projects are going to be able to do that because of the model that they've chosen to sustain their ecosystems, and what projects might not be able to do that because it's difficult to change things after the fact. We know Ethereum, you can certainly roll out another like a V3 or V2 or whatever if you're dealing in a V1, but some of these projects launched on other ecosystems, it's much more difficult to say, hey, you know what, we need to pivot because there's not really an easy way to pivot.
Yeah, they'll have to partner, right? They'll have to partner up with somebody that's able to get those licenses or has the resources to go through the proper channels, or Congress is going to have to weigh in here and just kind of lower the standards, maybe, or make it a little bit easier for these smaller companies to actually apply and successfully get their licenses. But now we know that since the bit license in New York is the hardest license to get in the entire country, since they're approved for that, the other licenses in each state should come pretty easily. So Forte is is going to have a smoother road ahead.
Yeah.
Now, it's so a Gala Games releases nodes. So the nodes are you're able to buy licenses and pay, and people pay for the music, right, on the node. Is that correct, Solomon?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty decent thread if you go to the kind of that one right there. Maybe we just kind of go through the thread. This is from the node catcher, but you can certainly read. We'll post some links here. But the opportunity to purchase license to operate multiple kinds of nodes in Gala's music ecosystem, different types of rewards / levels of support. Talking about the price as of now, it's $1,200 USD. Certainly not financial advice whatsoever, but this is interesting to me just because of, I would look at from the gaming and now, even with music, these ecosystems are gigantic. I would argue that Gala is probably in the top 3. And their nodes, as far as, the ability to purchase a node as far as the gaming ecosystem, I think back in January of last year, I think they were around $3,000 or $4,000. And I don't think that you can purchase a license right now for under like $100,000, which is just insane. And I think that it's just kind of an illusion as far as to where this whole space goes. Essentially, like I'm looking at this, and the way that I read it, it's almost like they're trying to frame it around potentially like being like the first blockchain record company, and essentially like these node licenses would potentially allow people to fulfill a role of kind of like a producer / actually like part ownership within like that record company. It's just interesting to me. I certainly picked up a handful of these. I may try to acquire a couple more. I think we're going to see other things come out of this as well. I think Snoop Dogg, who was obviously just at the Super Bowl yesterday, did a full album release on Gala maybe 3 or 4 days ago too, which is just nuts. And I think this is just kind of scratching the surface as far as where this potentially goes. Certainly nothing guaranteed, but yeah, I mean, I looked and I believe that Gala is going to raise the floor of these as far as the price is concerned. But I think with the gaming ecosystem nodes for Gala, there's only like 26,000 nodes or something like that right now. So if you have a revenue split amongst all of these music nodes and they raise the floor, I don't know if people get priced out, but certainly interesting. And I'm definitely going to be trying to play a part in it if I possibly can or participate. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, and kind of just shows you where everything is headed. So the music nodes will act as a jukebox music player to serve up NFT music tracks on demand. So I'm assuming that the node, you just buy different licenses, and people that use your jukebox, you get a small royalty for owning the licenses to the song. So,
I'm expecting them, honestly, because the previous tab that you had open, yeah, the Gala one right before it, right after this one. I think it goes into kind of the connection between gaming and music, and I think that that's where they're going to kind of try to go with this, is try to tie both together because we obviously know that there's obviously music in video games, and even just from the traditional lens as far as like artists are concerned. I think we're going to see quite a lot of I think, what was it, Katy Perry or something just put out a tweet a couple of days ago as well. I think she was being a little bit facetious, but we're going to see more and more musicians kind of try to empower themselves more and get away from that legacy model where, they may not be getting the amount of funds that they should be getting. So putting the power back in the hands of the creator, I think.
Yeah.
Granted, did you see the one thing that was funny to me though is like the when Snoop Dogg did like the album release, there was an unlimited number of tracks, and they were going for some ridiculous amount of money. So you have to kind of worry about oversaturation, just like anything else. But I think that if you're buying the shovel, which potentially these licenses could present themselves as being the shovel, you might be able to make out. So
yeah, and just what this model for different opportunities as well, like writing and articles, poetry, whatever, right? Art in general just seems, like it's pretty massive in the long term. Just all the different models that can come about. I do. Have you ever used Gala's play to earn games at all? Have you tried any of them?
No, because I got pissed off at myself that I didn't buy a node a year ago.
Yeah,
but I actually I do plan to participate more now that I'm trying to take part in the music node licenses and kind of seeing how that develops. And certainly once you get a little bit more hands-on with the gaming ecosystem as well, because I think it's just massive. And it's one of those things where we do so much digging into so many different things, and you're going to miss certain things. And oh man, I'm kicking myself for missing the gala nodes like a year ago, but it is what it is, because we've caught other things. So have you participated in the play to earn stuff on gala?
I've tried it. I haven't really invested a lot of time into it, but I've played a few of the games. There's one specifically called U-Town, which I have a friend that's invested in the NFTs, created the city, has all of his children playing in the game, and he gives them a cut of everything he earns. So it's like a sim city it's like mining energy and crops and just random things that he produces in the city and then sells for the U-Town token. And he's making interest every day, $200 a day just from his city creating all this stuff. So at first, I kind of went into the whole play to earn, what are you going to possibly make or anything? But it's really kind of like a proof of work system that's working to earn your money in a virtual world. So the concept to me is just very, very cool and just interesting. And, that opens the door for a lot of different other things, right? If artificial intelligence and everything gets involved with this, you can have smart cities and everything that can use this whole node type of structure. So
100%. I mean, it's really interesting to me to see all of the different kind of heavyweights trying to get into metaverse, NFTs, play to earn. What is that company that is everywhere as far as gaming is concerned? I always say Anna Monica, but I always pronounce it wrong. It's like Anna Monica or Animica. I forget how to pronounce it, but they're pretty much everywhere. And I've been interested in that Artifact one because Nike just acquired them as well. So certainly some crazy stuff going on.
Well, I know just for my daughter, she wants Roblox gift cards for her birthday and Christmas and everything. So it's I don't see it stopping. I just see it expanding from here on out.
1,000%, dude.
So
we saw this one. Go ahead, Darren.
Ripple's APAC policy director, ODL, can be used as a neutral bridge between CBDCs, which also ties into the Ernest Young document that shows a lot of traction in the APAC region. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, my opinion of kind of, the mechanism that XRP would play is kind of a bridge mechanism between these potentially low liquidity corridors. I don't necessarily know if it makes sense for something like, sending money between the US and the UK to have XRP as a bridge asset, because those are highly liquid corridors and there's already that corresponding relationship. But I think that that neutral bridge between some of these nations that are certainly also going to be launching central bank digital currencies, smaller nations with potential issues dealing in liquidity already, I think it'll be interesting to see what XRP can do as far as a bridge asset between those corridors.
It puts the pressure on the G7 correspondent banking relationships, right? So if you're in dollars to euros, something really liquid, it doesn't make much sense to use XRP, especially if they can make that more efficient. But now they have to drive the cost way down because there is something that can make that more efficient for the smaller people, smaller banks and financial institutions. The other thing is in these illiquid jurisdictions, right? The more illiquid jurisdictions that join the RippleNet XRP ledger network, the more traction it'll have. Like a bottoms up approach, sort of like just crypto in general takes this bottoms up approach. So if we get a massive network of illiquid corridors, now the US wants to send money to those illiquid corridors, and it's a whole platform that can do that. So it makes sense that initially that we don't see that, super liquid currencies actually, want to use XRP in any capacity, but as everything progresses, they're going to want it more and more to get involved with that network. So
we've seen historically too over the past few years that there's obviously a big power struggle between, I don't even know if it's a struggle. There's a big disconnect in power between like these credit unions and smaller banks in conjunction. If you put them on the, what their capabilities are and the fee structure and kind of what their ability to make decisions for themselves might be based on these, and everything has historically been dictated out by the larger kind of banking conglomerates. And it really does make sense that we do see a lot of these kind of like money transfer companies and even smaller banking initiatives like tying into like DLT. RippleNet is one example of that, to kind of empower themselves, put themselves on this more of a level playing field within their capabilities to operate almost independently, level playing field wise, versus like these just huge banking conglomerates. So,
absolutely. And then when you get all these smaller banks together, the other add-on stuff comes, right? If it's an open technology, they can make technologies that work with that open technology. Now you have the whole network. So if you're a reg tech and you want to do KYC, AML, you could build something specific for RippleNet that has that whole network, or just the XRP ledger, right? Just everyone that's part of that network that plugs into it. And, the innovation really starts spreading at a rapid speed when that happens. So the next piece is the Federal Reserve to test ability of largest banks to weather recession.
You giggled at this one a little bit whenever I shared this one with you. You could probably touch base on this one a little bit.
Well, to me, it's like what business of it is the central bankers to say, we want to choose the green energy field. We want to get rid of oil and gas, right? Or dirty energies, coals and everything. And it's really, they're guiding the markets, and they're not supposed to do that. That's against their mandates. They're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to, they should only care about inflation, really. And now they're branching off into every type of political. I'm not saying weather recession is political, but definitely politicians use green energy, weather, and everything to that nature into their benefits, and this side versus that side, even though it's arguably not that. But the Fed's dipping their toe into politics. I see more and more. It's that's really bad. They should just only focus on inflation, price stability, which we have 7.5%. So it's just a testament to how bad the Fed is doing its job, how bad central banks are doing their job, and it's just snowballing. So
yeah, I think when the rhetoric is so strong across the board as far as what's being presented, and certainly kind of that green initiative that we've seen from pretty much every institution that we look into, really aligning itself into 2030. This is kind of like a bandwagon jump on as far as, we need to make a shift. But I agree. I mean, they're dipping their toes into areas where it's almost mandating certain things via whatever rhetoric they want to spread, instead of just like you said, kind of just worrying about what they should be worrying about. And this isn't the first time we've seen stress testing. I mean, we consistently see this, but there have been some interesting things that have come out over the past month or two about stress testing, as far as I can't remember if it was I think it was the IMF talking about stress testing regarding some sort of like an actual like network crash across like the entire banking ecosystem. So interesting.
Yeah, and like, how does weather recession really play into a stress test? I guess if a state goes out of the economy for a few months or something, I don't really know. But are you planning on investing anything into this sector that kind of corresponds with green energy and weather? Do you have any investment specific to that?
I would love to, because I think that it's going to be a huge opportunity. If I could find time to potentially research other things besides digital assets, blockchain, crypto. But there's going to be a ton of opportunities, like even regarding like biometrics, green energy, all that stuff, artificial intelligence. I mean, I think that there's all of this stuff eventually ties in together into what we're looking at right now, in my opinion. So I certainly want to, I don't know, because I think that there's so many synergies based on what we're looking in right now. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. I think it makes sense to try to delve out and to look into other potential investment opportunities. I haven't yet, but I think that there's still potentially a little bit of time regardless.
So Energy Web Token is one of those platforms that develops the infrastructure just for green energy, smart grids. They have a lot of proof of concepts and partnerships, and they're making a lot of traction. So you might want to look into that. The other thing is, outside of the crypto market, I know, inside the crypto market as well, but Christina Georgieva from the IMF has talked about putting a floor under the carbon credits market. So essentially repricing carbon credits. We don't know what the floor is going to be, but essentially they would want to just keep raising it to make sure businesses are paying their fair share for green energy. Now, there's ETFs that track carbon credits, as well as there's tokens on Uphold that are specifically for carbon credits. There's even some DeFi platforms on Cello that are carbon credits. I think Climate DAO is another one that does carbon credit. Yeah. There is opportunity within the blockchain space, the crypto space. Now that we're talking about this, you want to touch on the Bitcoin chart, just because timing into the markets. I was going to say the green ETF is a way outside of the crypto markets if you're kind of worried about what's going on with Bitcoin. Just so you know, the EMA, the 50 EMA is blue and the 21 EMA is yellow.
Yeah, I mean, bro, touching on what you talked about Energy Web as well. I mean, Energy Web is one of those assets that I think that we all knew was going to be big, and it was one of those ones that I just didn't buy during the last cycle. But probably over the course of the past 6 months, I think that we did see Ripple kind of join Energy Web for going carbon neutral. I've had discussions with other individuals too. I know I've talked about Alliance Block a lot, but I've had discussions with Rashid from Alliance Block, and they chose what did they choose for the Alliance? I don't know if it was the Alliance Bridge or one of their newer initiatives was directly tied into, I think that was maybe the DEX, directly integrated into Energy Web. And I've had discussions where, I'm just led to believe that I think Energy Web is definitely sustainable, and they're going to be an absolute behemoth in this space. And I think that almost any asset or, any digital asset that we're dealing in right now, if they're not making gigantic strides at least having the network be carbon neutral by X time frame, and I would say 2025 would be great, 2030 at the very latest. I think that they're going to be at a loss as far as their ability to compete in this space. So
yeah, and I mean, Energy Web Token. So let me just bring up the chart for Energy Web Token. Sorry, I don't have this prepared, but now that we're talking about it, I'm kind of. And I just so everyone knows, I don't own a lot of Energy Web Token, not much of it, but it's definitely something that I'm interested in. I don't know the longest, but anyway, if I had the full chart, there's the initial run up, and then it looks something like this. But it really kind of missed this run completely. Like, it's kind of like how XRP and Stellar and everything, they had a run a while ago, and then it's kind of sideways action. You can see that you're kind of just sitting on the floor for Energy Web. So it's definitely going. It's definitely like hasn't gotten overvalued during this phase in the market. Now, of course, what happens with Bitcoin will determine, the short-term duration, what's going to happen with Energy Web Token as well as some of the others. What are your thoughts on what's going on with the charts on Bitcoin, Solomon?
Yeah, I mean, you have the 200-day pulled up, but I mean, the 21 and the 50 are kind of what I'm looking at from the weekly standpoint, and certainly have to break above the 50, which is blue. I'm colorblind, but I will just say, we touched on it briefly, I think, the last discussion. I mean, look at that massive wick getting rejected off of the 21 EMA right here. But, I think that I kind of pulled up the previous 3 times that on the weekly that the 21 broke below the 50 in essentially 90 days until bottom. And normally there was about a 50% correction to the downside, with exception of March of 2020, because it was literally like a day or two and it broke back above. But every other time it was like 90 days until a bottom. And that bottom would be 50% down from where that price action was at when that cross occurred, basically. So interesting, because, I mean, for me, I would say at the very, very lowest, if we do go into some sort of an actual like real bear market, I would think Bitcoin would go to like 14K at the lowest. But I've kind of had this in my head where I think that it makes sense that 20K range, slightly above the last bull market's all-time high, which was like 18.5, or whatever chart you're using. It's going to shake out a little bit differently, but those are kind of my thoughts. And I mean, I don't know. For me personally, and this isn't advice, but I've been trying to stack fiat to an extent so that I can be prepared for potential opportunities, maybe putting it into some sort of a yield mechanism. But yeah, I mean, I think if we have a cross, it's going to get nasty unless it's some sort of a fake out.
Yeah, I mean, just from macroeconomic perspective, though, with the inflation at 7.5%, we saw this sell-off because they think the Fed's going to overreact. The markets think that the Fed's going to overreact and some type of rate hike is priced in. But, until they actually raise interest rates, I'm still way bullish. And like they have to actually, raise it significantly to fight inflation, which I don't think is going to happen. So I agree with you that for the short term, this does not look good. But if we zoom out a little bit, we've essentially just made higher lows, higher highs. So until this becomes, a lower high, lower low, then I'm not going to get too concerned. Now, of course, I protect myself for every scenario because I don't think I know everything or anything. I just want to protect myself for any type of scenario. And if we saw some type of retrace or even this, right, you have kind of a head and shoulders forming right now, which would bring you back down to the 20,000. So the bearish scenario is, I agree that, we're going to use the previous all-time high as support and kind of consolidate before we make our next run up. But to me, just with everything that's happening with the Fed, maybe they hike interest rates, the market dumps, but eventually they're going to be proven that they're ineffective, and that's just going to send crypto. In my opinion, I don't know anything for certain, but I just think the dollar's not going to make it just from the bad monetary policy that's going on.
I think it's also, a lot about, we talked a little bit about this before. I think the market, regardless right now of what happens, is very oversaturated. And, bear markets historically, obviously price action down, price action, undervalued as far as what the median should be. But also, bear markets really do show people who's building for sustainability in this space. A lot of these oversaturated projects that have launched, a lot of the meme aspects, I think I don't know if they would be able to survive. Some of them certainly would, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it's definitely like this cleansing event, as well as it's massive opportunities for us, right? If we can buy assets that we know are going to do very well in the long term, we get much cheaper prices. So it's definitely not a bad thing. I'm just not convinced yet. I have to wait until this lower low or this higher low comes in, and then I'll start worrying more. But like I said, I'm preparing for either scenario that takes place. Just
I think if you're for me, if you're investing into sustainability within this space, and you're not buying at all-time high, let's say you make simple rules for yourself and you're buying assets you're only buying anything that is 50% down from all-time high. And I like using like the price action below the 21 and 50 EMA also, RSI, oversold, depending on what you're tracking, because it's going to be different for every asset, but usually, like underneath 30 on the RSI. And then you're just willing to hold for a couple of years, regardless of what the intermittent ebbs and flows might be. You're probably going to be okay in this space. It's when you start panicking and buying into hype and things like that gets really, really scary. And that's why a lot of people, I think, get shaken from this market or consider it too volatile, because they're just making terrible decisions.
Yeah. I mean, a way to help that, right, is not like keep track of the day to day and just kind of know what you have, hold, and just kind of get it out of your mind. Well, I know when I'm tracking day to day and I count every dollar value, it starts adding up, and I'm like, oh no, I just lost X amount. I need to do this. I need to do this. But when I just get it out of my head and just focused on long-term proposition, I'm much better off. Which I have a trade bag specifically for the short term that kind of keeps me occupied. Did you see this news article with the couple that was caught hacking Bitfinex a couple of years ago? So the Bitcoin's now worth like billions of dollars, and they ended up getting caught.
Yeah. Do you have like is the rap video on here?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I mean, this is what we're dealing with.
So I turned off the volume, but
yeah, that's fine. No, but it's fly like a gator. But what is she facing potentially? Like 20 years in prison? Grandmother crocodile.
20 years in prison. I mean, honestly, if you steal up $20 billion, right, that's kind of a low on the spectrum of time you could do. But she's looking at conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and everything. In my opinion, though, it's hard to believe that these two were the ones to hack Bitfinex and do all this illicit activity around it. It just seems to me that, there's something more going on here. And then, how long did the FBI or whoever is doing this investigation have the wallet addresses? Like, when did they actually know that these two were responsible? Oh, by the way, she's a crypto columnist for Forbes, and it's written negative bearish articles towards Bitcoin. And meanwhile, she was, trying to sell the Bitcoin for gift cards and stuff, and try to make sure that nobody knew it was her wallet. But she ended up getting caught. I don't know the specifics on how they caught them, but it just goes to show you that, all these open ledgers with the FBI, the DEA, they don't care. They would rather you be on a public ledger where they don't need a warrant. They could just start analyzing the ledger. If you did this through a bank, they need to get a judge to say, we want to look at this person's bank account, XYZ, and, all the politicians that are saying, oh, crypto is for this or that. It really, the government loves crypto just because of this. They don't need warrants. They could just circumvent all the judges' subpoenas and everything to start an investigation. So,
and that's, for me, that's a lot of where this whole space goes anyways. You're tied into the same system. The only real freedom that we still have left, separate from our phones, is I can just ditch my phone and do whatever I want to do as far as going out and taking out cash from the ATM and then doing what I want with it. That certainly goes away once we're all tied in. I did want to say that the lyrics are absolutely hilarious within this. Breathe fire and shit silver. So we're doing a lot of that from fucking prison. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, so she's even rocking the fanny pack and everything.
That's what I saw. Yeah, the fanny pack is
acting hard on you.
Fantastic. Did you see any of the Super Bowl crypto commercials yesterday?
I saw a couple of them. I saw the Coinbase crypto commercial. So it was just I thought it was a brilliant ad.
But then, with Coinbase, as soon as you scan the QR code that you go and they're like, Coinbase is down for maintenance. It's just interesting. But
Well,
I'm sure
at first I thought, it's like a stupid ad or whatever. They're copying the DVD player. But now that I'm thinking about it, like we're talking about it because it was, so minimal. It's on everyone's minds because it was, so terrible at the same time. So
Yep.
It might be more effective than I'm thinking it is. But it's pretty.
It was almost like the whole, like at least the first half of the Super Bowl, like every commercial was crypto. It was crazy. Even Matthew McConaughey, that guy is such a whatever, in my opinion. He's just like, what was he saying? He's like, some people are focused about the metaverse and some people are focused about this, but we're focused about Earth being right here. And I'm just like, okay. I think it was Salesforce or something like that. But yeah, I mean, almost every commercial that I saw was crypto. The FTX one was actually pretty cool. I think pulling Larry David in from Curb Your Enthusiasm, the Seinfeld writer, obviously. But yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of it. And I think that now it'll be interesting to see if we do go into like some sort of a bear market, if we still see the same thing next year. But I think that, the cat's out of the bag to an extent now.
I wonder, like legally, like if we get to a point where they regulate commercials, because I know like medicines and stuff, prescription medicines, you can't advertise that on TV. Like I don't see commercials on buying stocks or anything, maybe like an investment platform or something to that nature, but I never specifically see, a platform that's talking about crypto. So I wonder, what if regulators are going to actually regulate what you can and can't advertise to the public, and if anyone's breaking the line right now, blurring the line of what should ethically be done versus not ethically. I didn't get a chance to watch too many of them. Was there any of them that were like teetering on the efficacy?
I saw a lot of there was a lot of exchange based ones. Okay. I think crypto.com, Coinbase, FTX. I'm sure there was probably a couple other ones, but nothing that stood out, and maybe I missed something. But I mean, imagine seeing like, what was that coin that we had on the podcast last time? There was one called No Shit. Imagine seeing like No Shit coin advertised at the Super Bowl or something. I mean, that would probably border on whatever it may border on. But yeah, I didn't see any crazy DeFi stuff or anything like that. But
so a brief guideline on self-sovereign identities, which kind of ties into all this of what's going on with tracking the wallets. What are your thoughts on self-sovereign identities?
I mean, this deals in pretty much the personal custodianship of your own data. And I looked it up. I forget what office that is, Darren, but Federal Office for Information Security is like high government within Germany, I believe.
It's somewhere in Europe, Germany, or I want to say Switzerland or Germany. I forget which one, or maybe it's
it's the German upper level federal agency in charge of managing computer and communication security. But yeah, I mean, we've seen this. Oh, God, there have been so many even like patents and stuff like that we've seen about everything tying in, like biometrics tying in. Even that Ernst & Young document that talked about, was it biometric cards 2021 or whatever? I mean, custodying and custodianship of your own data is probably where this goes eventually. But it'll be interesting. I mean, there's probably going to be like trustless counterparties that are custodying these things for you. We touched base on it about kind of the KYC changing across all these exchanges as well. I would imagine once this data initiative really kicks off, where we're custodying our own data, you won't have to go through the loops as potentially as far as what you have to do right now with exchanges. Because even with exchanges right now, it's scary because you'll like sign up and then regulations change. And then there's additional KYC mechanisms that you have to go through, and like your assets may be trapped. There's all sorts of things. So I'm kind of, I'm very wary about this just because I don't know who really facilitates like the trust mechanisms, and people are too lazy to even custody their own finances right now. So how are they going to custody their own data? But yeah, I mean, I think it might make certain things easier as far as exchanges and dealing with like the changes for KYC and AML. But it does scare me about where all this goes, I think.
Well, yeah, it's definitely scary. I just know that this is going to happen. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that the whole digital identity part of this it has to happen. Even for a lot of these platforms to even work, they need a digital identity component. So, hopefully, though, we get to, like they said, self-sovereign. We get to an area where we can actually trust, where we say, you can look at this part of my ID, you could look at this part of my ID, and we can actually control that. So if Coinbase wants to look at my bank records, they first have to ask me to do so. So, but even still, like with everything that's going on, this is probably leading down a dark path, but hopefully, not, but definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're filing your taxes and you have that read-only API that you can send to your tax professional. I would envision it being potentially similar to that when you're trying to verify yourself into an exchange, is kind of having that read-only API data pulled from wherever you're custodying your identity, or if you're just self-custodying it somehow. But yeah, I mean, we certainly all get tied in. It just makes sense. It's another initiative in what's the word I'm looking for? Just data custodianship right now. I mean, like, I have a medical record from the military that is like this thick, you know what I mean? And I've got to pull all through that. I mean, having everything kind of digital makes sense, but how it's custodied is really going to be interesting, and how people are going to self-custody it. Because imagine losing your private key. Like, if there's a private key to your to your health records and your health data, like, imagine losing that. That would be horrifying, obviously.
Well, I think that's part of the biometrics part, right? If it's tied to your fingerprint or your retina scan or something, then you have access to everything that's involved with it. But like you said, who is custodying it? Because there has to be somebody that can, retrieve an ID in case you lose it, that type of stuff. So I don't think it's going to be necessarily completely self-sovereign. There's probably going to be some types of centralization without this network. So it's like those points of failure, I don't know. We'll find out, but this is definitely needed for crypto and digital assets, blockchain, everything with technology to progress. So I definitely see this coming. We'll have to look at the details as they come out. It's still kind of young, but
they're already doing like retina scanning and stuff like that. And I think it's China, right? I'm pretty sure they're already doing a lot of that stuff in some of these nations, but I don't know to what extent.
Yeah, they do it here. You can get your retina scanned. I believe like they do it to all the prisoners and everything too. They scan all their retinas, and they have all that stuff on file. So
crazy,
but pretty. Okay, so the CFTC should oversee crypto spot markets as retiree before Congress. Now, did you happen to see this? This is the Senate Agricultural Committee had, which I don't understand why digital assets are spoken about in the Senate Agricultural Committee. But anyway, they had this whole long Senate conference where they talked about digital assets, and the senators kind of pressed certain crypto advocates for suggestions. Did you happen to see it?
Yeah, I saw it. I'd be interested on your thoughts on it, because I know that you talked about these like special purpose initiatives that could be potentially divvied out into some of these projects versus like, so maybe touch base on like the CFTC versus the SEC and what some of these projects could potentially be dealing in, because I know that you're maybe more suited to have the discussion.
Yeah, so the SEC right now, if you have a crypto that was regulated by the SEC, the issue with that is it puts a tremendous amount of friction on anyone that wants to use that digital asset. So for XRP, for example, now everyone that owns everyone that sells and buys XRP needs to be a broker dealer. There needs to be disclosures, and it puts a tremendous amount of slowness, friction, and kind of ruins the whole mechanism for XRP to be a payments digital asset, right? So the CFTC wouldn't require all those different things, right? So if you have gold and you use gold for its utility, you make jewelry, you don't have to go to the CFTC and get special permission to do that, or to provide disclosures to everyone that buys your jewelry. Now, during this conference, it seemed like many of the crypto advocates were pushing for the CFTC to be the overseer of crypto, as well as self-regulatory organizations. So we saw Michelle Bond leave Ripple and move to Atom. And that's what Atom is. And essentially what a SRO does is they kind of guide whoever's in charge, this needs to be done, or this has to be done, or they can oversee certain aspects of this. And an example of this is FINRA, New York Stock Exchange. They oversee certain things in the stock market and kind of give guidance to the SEC as needed. So they kind of give a helping hand. Sam Bankman-Fried was asked specifically on who's going to fund this, and he said FTX is certainly going to write a check. He said it's not going to be a blank check, but it's going to be a check, and he's certain that the rest of crypto would be more than happy to write to donate to that type of cause. And for the most part, most senators looked at this with optimism. They weren't anything. There was no bad reactions from all of this, so it seemed quite favorable that the senators got their questions answered and the messages across, and they did a pretty good job. As Perry Ann Boring, Sam Bankman-Fried, and someone at the global Sandy Rowe from the Global Blockchain Association. So it seems like progress. And just from what Jeremy Hogan and John Deaton are tweeting about, it seems like there's this turf war, which makes sense. If you're a regulator, you want as much power as possible. So they're CFTC, the SEC is fighting, and it seems like the Congress is going to have to weigh in and actually separate these things.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as like under the purview of the CFTC, it would almost be just a guidance type thing. So like FTX, for example, or whatever regulatory clarity is given by the CFTC, like these special purpose, whatever they may be, would it separate these blockchain firms from potentially having to deal with the SEC, or would it more so just give guidance for how to potentially operate based on what they're dealing in, so that they wouldn't fall under the?
Yeah, it seems like it would separate them, and of course, the CFTC will hand over the companies that they believe are securities and everything. But at first, that it seems like that CFTC is supposed to be that first layer, and then it moves through the process. So they're supposed to, but in combination with an SRO, is supposed to figure everything out. And I'm sure there'd be some type of grace period, kind of like what Hester Peirce was talking about with the safe that's set up. But eventually, if you're a security and you're an investment contract, you're going to go to the SEC, and they're going to either fine you, or it was on you to go to the SEC at first, right? So there are security tokens, STOs, so there's security token offering, which is just a stock that's tokenized, so you can do everything with the token. So that was talked about and everything too, but that they would get jurisdiction of actual securities. The problem is they're labeling everything as security. We talked about this. Why should youth start investing in Bitcoin? Do you have any thoughts on this?
It's just interesting. So I mean, looking at kind of like the data analytics, because I know you and I both produce content on things like YouTube, whatever. Looking at the age range, like my 13 to 18-year-old age range is 0% of the audience, and even like the 19 to 23-year-old is maybe 2 or 3%. And I know that we touched base on this yesterday when we were talking on the phone. A lot of it might be the fact that, those individuals just don't have enough money to potentially invest. But I mean, they've got this to me like deals in adoption as well, because a lot of parents out there, have kids that are within these age ranges. And I think getting kids interested. And I think that we do over time, because you had mentioned Roblox, you mentioned your daughter in Roblox. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see when we really do have that mass adoption from the gaming standpoint, things that kids are just inherently interested in. I think that we're going to see a little bit of a shift. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's Bitcoin. I mean, it's just kind of the space as a whole. Why are it's not why should you start investing in Bitcoin and digital assets? It's why should they care? And I think that we do see somewhat of a change over time as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, I know for myself, I've like ever since I was little, I like to invest in things. So I know just that the mindset's not even popular, right? But I mean, if you think about, what the central banks have done to the markets too, they've kind of made it into, you made it really difficult. Or I guess the opposite side of those, they kind of made it fun. They made it into a casino, very speculative. So I think a lot of it's personality types. I think people just are depressed about finances in general. Like, what's the point? It's like you barely are getting by. I think a lot of people have that mindset as well. And there's a quote by Murray Rothbard that's like a libertarian that talks about how boring macroeconomics are, and how most people don't want to even be involved with macroeconomics or anything to that nature. So I think a lot of it's personality type as well as money and everything. But like you said, with Roblox, the digitization and making assets into things that were never assets before now become attractive for the younger people. I mean, there's some pretty cool opportunities in gaming, as well as what else comes about this. What happens with fitness, right? Like, if you're able to, I don't know, tokenize actual health, or, you get a certain, every time you get a step, you get a percentage of a token type of deal. So, it's going to gamify a lot of things and do a lot of cool things. But
micro payments for not sitting on your couch.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's really happening.
Yeah, this is interesting, and I just am thinking about this now. So, like, this was last year, and they were teaching my oldest kid about finance. And at that time, I think she was probably around 13 in school. And what they were teaching her essentially was that the reason that you put money into a saving, like, they were teaching like the flow of money, and it's like you deposit money into a bank account and it goes, like, literally they were telling her that it goes into a vault at the bank, which is certainly not not true. But I think that a lot of it comes down to the educational aspect, which, our children, at least I know my children, are not being empowered through the school system to learn about finance, and not even finance, but to learn about the future of finance. They don't necessarily even talk about inflation and things like this. They literally just talk about the same legacy aspects that people were actually believing in 20, 30 years ago. You put money into a bank, you earn interest. That's how you save your money. That's how you potentially gain wealth via savings. And it's just not possible at this point in time unless you already have a shit ton of money. So it'll be interesting to see potentially that rhetoric shift, because I know in school, they're like, kids are talking about NFTs, kids are talking about Bitcoin and things like that, but they're not necessarily understanding it in it. And I think that probably over the next decade or so, we do, as regulatory clarity gets handed down and stuff like that. And I know in some nations, we're already seeing educational initiatives as far as teaching kids about some of these aspects. We know in colleges that they have blockchain courses. I think it starts flowing down into younger age groups as well as mass adoption gets closer. So,
yeah. Well, hopefully, right? It's a better world where people actually know about this stuff and care about this stuff. Like you're saying, you put your money in the vault. Like, how wrong is that? And that's what they're teaching kids. It's kind of like they want everyone to be dumb and stupid so they can take advantage. Kind of like the SEC thing that we went over last week. It's like they want you to be just stupid so they can take advantage of you. Yep. So DBS plans to launch a retail digital asset trading desk by year end. This came out today, which, DBS is one of the largest banks in the world. I believe there's a 2015 document with Ripple, so really old, but they said they were doing a proof of concept with Ripple, as well as one of the board members comes from DBS. So it's going to be live by the end of 2022. Back to the APAC region, that whole region's lit up with activity. DBS is one of the JP Morgan of that region, so that's definitely positive.
Yeah, gigantic players in this ecosystem now. I mean, DBS, and then last week we just had BlackRock as well. opening up a crypto trading platform. Now, what's interesting about this is there's multiple articles on this. It's alluding to $10 trillion as far as what's under BlackRock's purview, but it's a lot bigger than that. This crypto trading platform is essentially going to interoperate with their Aladdin platform, so their Aladdin investment platform. The Aladdin investment platform oversees, that's an acronym. I forget what it stands for. I know derivatives is one of the words within that acronym of Aladdin, but that actual overseeing of all the assets on Aladdin is like $21.6 trillion. And we know arguably BlackRock is one of the organizations that pretty much runs the world, right? So you could even, you have the Algorand thing pulled up too. I mean, just look at the major players that are operating in this space, where they come from, where they've been previously, and where they've chosen to go. It's just absolute insanity. And it just leads me to believe that we're exactly in the right space, regardless of market fluctuations. I mean, if you actually zoom out and look at what's going on, look at who's involving themselves in this space, it's massive, and massive is an understatement. I mean, it's as big can get, you know?
It's the whole financial system, right? The whole financial system is morphing and changing to blockchain digital assets. And so BlackRock, they've actually written guidance to the central banks that the central banks are carrying out today. That's what they wrote in a white paper is actually happening in this world. So when you say massive, it's pretty much, you know, the whole U.S. economy is somehow tied to BlackRock. This is, you know, the systemically important bank, and you know, they're moving in to trade crypto through the Aladdin investment platform. SAP has a ton of integrations into various crypto projects, RippleNet being one of them. But you know, just being on SAP allows them to have that upgraded infrastructure. Now, well, you mentioned Algorand and Stacey Warren. That's pretty Warden rather. She's moving from J.P. Morgan to Algorand. So she's going from the super ultra conservative bank to this risky crypto token, right? Like how bizarre is that? We
know Algorand deals a lot in CBDCs as well. Like as big can get. And you said it's the whole financial system, but there was an interesting document that came out probably 4 months ago from Alex Pentland, the dude at MIT. The document's literally called From Internet to Interledger. And it talks about the financial system kind of being first, payments, settlements, all of these aspects. But then it talks about kind of what we were alluding to earlier with AI and biometrics. And it's pretty much like a 20-year framework, 25-year framework in which pretty much everything gets consumed by distributed ledger technology. Interledger, you know, is kind of that agnostic aspect, but it's tying everything into the Internet of Value where they're going to monetize absolutely everything, and it's all going to be running on a more efficient system. So it's really insane. And that it should lead us all to believe that, you know, there's going to be multiple, assuming they don't regulate us out, there's going to be multiple opportunities over the next probably 2 or 3 decades. Now, those are going to shift into different mechanisms as far as tying more things into the system. But you talked about investing into other things like the green economy and all these things. Like this all ties in. It's just going to be kind of a phased approach based on them. I think payments and in the financial system and then leading into settlements. I mean, that's certainly probably first, but you have to kind of interoperate between everybody before you can actually let these things go live. Algorand is huge. I mean, just moving from JP Morgan, and where else? She was somewhere else as well.
It says
Milken Institute. Yeah. NASDAQ.
NASDAQ, the U.S. Treasury Department. I mean, this isn't, you know, they portray crypto as risky and fraudulent, but this person wouldn't give up a prosperous career in banking in the U.S. Treasury to work for a risky startup. You know, that doesn't make much sense to me, especially I mean, these people know, right? Like they've been in the industry. They know everything that's going on in the industry, and that's why they're moving their careers over. As well as we're seeing a lot of political rhetoric with crypto and digital assets, right? So In my opinion, like these big guys leaning in now is in perfect alignment with the politics that are happening. And this is exactly what we're seeing. This video came out with Ted Cruz, kind of portraying the liberals, the Democrats as anti-crypto and the Republicans as pro-crypto, which we know is not true. Yet he's putting that spin on it. So, what are your thoughts on the political rhetoric that we're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded all to being kind of just one big show that we're all kind of sitting and watching, because I think regardless, I think that both sides definitely know what's happening, and there's not really a way to stop the train from rolling down the tracks. Even with big moves, I mean, you talk about Mary Jo White essentially being one of the head litigators for Ripple at this point in time, and she literally was the head of the SEC. So it's like it's across the board. I don't take a whole ton of stock. Now, certainly laws have to get passed, et cetera, but I don't know. I look in the US at it just kind of being this just big show that we're all being privy to watching. And I don't trust either side what they're saying, because I know what's going to be happening anyways.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, just the investment, the career changes. We know where this headed, and like the politics surrounding it is the justification of it. But I really find the timing interesting, because he's getting all the politicians are getting more vocal about this stuff, and at the same time, this is where the incumbents are leaning in now. So the ones that control the lobbyist groups are leaning in now. The politics are, we're starting to hear a lot of noise about it. Like we've always heard noise about crypto, but not to this extent, and it's really snowballing from here. So hopefully we see some more.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be framed around rhetoric as far as what we're being presented, I think. I mean, we can even go back to Jay Clayton's calendar from August of 2018, where literally the only people in that meeting were, what was it, Jay Clayton, Brad Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, and John Roscoe, who was the special assistant to the president. And it's like having rhetoric that the Republicans are super pro crypto is just not the case, because we could have seen something during the last presidential term if that were the case. We certainly hadn't seen that. And now there's a shift where Democrats certainly are more in power during this cycle, and we still haven't seen any clarity. I mean, it's just all until something gets flushed out, and I know that it will. It's just all noise to me, and it's like we're watching just this big show.
Yeah, I agree. And also they're doing the same thing with inflation, right? They're politicizing inflation, they're politicizing crypto. And it's I mean, do you see that that's how stuff gets done though? Like it gets so politicized at one point it breaks, or do you think it's just already done?
I don't even think it's the political aspect so much for me. It's just the system inherently. Like, how long can the system be pegged up until it breaks, until they need something else? And it leads me to believe that I look at like the time frames as far as what we know is going to be released, what we know is going to be built. Like, I know ISO 20022 doesn't necessarily mean that these assets are going to be utilized, but we do know that the deadline for Swift is 2025, and they're moving over to that new standard across the board. So I think timing is interesting for me as far as when assets could potentially be used. Doesn't mean that they will. I really think it's timing. I think it ties into a lot about this green initiative for 2030. I think it ties into a lot about the CBDC initiatives, the digital euro initiatives, and we're seeing like a very similar time frame across the board for a lot of these things. So crypto exchanges with BlackRock and stuff like that in 2022 is great, but that 2024, 2025 time frame is going to be really, really interesting, which would align if we were to go into some sort of a bear market historically with. This would be in contrast to lengthening cycles, diminishing returns. A lot of people talk about that, but if it's more of a normal bear market, the next cycle, as far as consolidation and leading into that bull market, would probably be right in that 2024, 2025 timeframe. So I think it'll be interesting, because we're all kind of here, like at least I'm really here to see that utility run. And I think that the only assets that are going to potentially be able to participate in that utility run are ones that do fall within some sort of a regulatory framework. I mean, it almost has to be that way, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely gearing up for that utility run. We're seeing the positioning, we're seeing the regulations, everything coming out of this. So
it's not to say that that's not to say that shitcoins won't continue to be have insane ROIs and percentages. It's just, are they going to be sustainable? Are they going to be, I don't know. How do you regulate them out? But if there's a way to regulate them out, they will try to regulate them out, I think.
Well, I mean, like GameStop and AMC and everything are kind of like the meme stocks, right? So there is this meme type of sector, if you want to call it that. I thought this went well at first. It's having a little hard time having like a natural rhythm to everything, but it cleared up towards the mid. What are your thoughts on podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to flush out what this looks like over time. I really want to get some guests on. Really want to try to figure out maybe even from the visual aesthetic, like Zoom, because just so everybody knows, like we're doing this over Zoom, but there's going to be a way that we flesh this out in a probably more streamlined manner. We definitely want to go the podcast route as far as making this audio as well. I think what we're going to do is maybe share this in a couple of segments throughout the week. Moving forward, we're going to do one a week and maybe do 2 or 3 segments throughout the week so that it's not just 1 hour and 15-minute conversation, but it's going to be finding our rhythm. But I think for you and I, we talked about this. It's just about consistency. I know we couldn't record it yesterday on Sunday, which is when we're trying to do them, but it really is consistency and just finding the rhythm, finding the flow, and finding kind of where we fit in this niche, because it's very similar to what we already do. But I want to extrapolate that out even and just make it, we've talked about just bullshitting to an extent, bringing people on, talking about what we already talk about. I don't know if you need to see my face gigantic, because I think the content is key. And I think Darren resonates that same belief, is that we're trying to showcase content, not ourselves so much. But yeah, I love doing these. And, I think it's just an opportunity to talk to a like-minded individual. You certainly have traits and research mechanisms that I don't have. And I think that's vice versa. And it's just nice hearing the viewpoints. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. This is an enjoyable conversation. It's if anyone's out there that has any comments or suggestions on, guests or something specific that we should talk about, or just formats, please let us know. We'll read all of them. We're also we're going to do this in 2 parts, so I probably should have said that in the beginning, but oh well.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to help, like Darren said, I mean, reach out to us. I mean, we're all about community, and we would love to have a conversation. So this isn't going to stop. We're going to keep doing this weekly. And we'll go from there, dude.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So thanks for watching. Please be sure to subscribe to both of our channels, and have a good one.
See you guys.